This company that we got connected to through Uplink is from Lebanon. They have the capacity to process the entire island of the Dominican Republic's plastic waste and create new products out of it and be able to pay the community to be sorting and collecting. So we're in the process now through Uplink and through the community that Uplink is helping share with us to figure out how to get the Dominican Republic a recycling system.
Uplink also introduced us to one of the major logistics companies within the Middle East, and the sort of push we got through the platform, through the World Economic Forum platform, when they published our news, our ideas, videos. The night our video got published, in the first 24 hours, we generated almost 2,000 leads. Our phones were ringing off the hook.
This spotlighting and featuring of our project around the world help us to get in touch with people, especially in the UK, who are now available to help us to launch our project here and find more clients to supply the raw material, the plastic raw material that we are collecting.
We've had multiple organic inquiries through our website from countries as far as Australia and Japan, which have led to some really fruitful conversations. And now we're just building up on that traction and enjoying the positive PR.
Prime Minister of Norway actually gave us a video message congratulating us on our achievements. And it's not every day for a small company like Binovo to receive attention from the Prime Minister of Norway.
If people who have different expertise can come together to solve these problems, we actually can fulfill a lot of the challenges that we're facing. You know, I believe the more we band together, the stronger all of us are, and the results sometimes take a long time, but I know that we're all in this together and it is all happening in the right time.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this incredible session on shaping a new ocean economy. My name is Lynn, and I am a journalist and executive producer at Channel News Asia here in Singapore. To all of you who are joining us from Europe, good morning. And for all of you who are joining us from Asia, good afternoon. The pandemic has had an incredibly devastating impact A lot of the focus, though, goes to the big economies. But what we mustn't forget is that the small island developing states are even harder hit in some aspects. Economies there have been devastated. The gross domestic product in some places has plummeted by 7.3%, and unemployment is at record levels. So this, though, is not a session about bewailing what has hit all of us, but rather to look forward to how we can do together fantastic things with new ideas, new initiatives that could create something better, not just for building back better, but building forward better. I'm going to introduce a fantastic panel today who will help to, I hope, stimulate some of these ideas. And some of the opening remarks now are going to come to you from Shinichi Kitaoka, President of the Japan International Cooperation Agency. Just to scene set some of the things that have been done, some of the good initiatives, but also many more of the things that need to be done. Mr. Kitaoka, would you like to start off?
Yes, thank you very much, Ms. Lin, for a very kind introduction. It's a great pleasure for me to speak about states, small island developing states. Japan is, compared to them, big and developed island country in the Pacific. Well, we have a long history of communication with those small island countries in the Pacific region. So let me begin with 3 key words: people, prosperity, and planet. This 3P approach is, very familiar to you, a range of SDG 14 challenges. And then this is based on our experience with the communication with the islands in South Pacific region, particularly. And then the most important precondition to think about the small island developing state is the tyranny of distance and sparse population. Major markets are so far away, they cannot benefit from economies of scale. Then the COVID-19 pandemic also revealed vulnerability of their excessive dependence on tourism. That's a very difficult issue right now. Now, on the people. Under this COVID-19 pandemic, the human security, which we are proposing for years, is becoming more and more important. First of all, even before pandemic, many people in cities are suffering from the nutritional imbalances. As their states are increasingly dependent on imported food of poor nutrition quality. Given the limited access to quality medical service and physical remoteness, cities need to pay particular attention to flows of people. Therefore, they close the door. And then against such backdrop, in their combat against COVID-19, cities must get comprehensively prepared for prevention, precaution, and treatment, including remote medical care. And then JICA is now has started last year. We have launched a global initiative for health and medicine last year. And then our target, one of the important targets is the South Pacific states. Prevention is, first of all, very important. And then the precaution and treatment. Also, another important thing in small islands states, they have a relatively limited possibility of having higher education because of the small population. We are now providing them more opportunity to come to Japan to study. And then because there are no college or university in some of the islands, we are now encouraging even high school students or junior college graduates to come to Japan. And also another very important thing was a safe drinking water. This has to be provided to all seas population at low cost and with lower environment impact. These are most important issues among the people, about the people. Then prosperity. The second point is prosperity. Marine resources are of particular importance to the economic prosperity of seas. They need to effectively address the issue of illegal, unreported, and unregulated, in other words, IUU fishing, for ensuring the sustainable utilization of our marine fisheries resources and maintain freedom of navigation. And then to that end, also they need to have more law enforcement capabilities, maritime law enforcement capabilities. Without that, they cannot maintain the order around them. And then because of the remoteness with the other neighboring countries, they need to be assisted in to improve the connectivities with other countries. Now the third point is the planet, very important. You know, seas face a serious marine pollution. I have visited many those small island countries, but we are surprised to the terrible state of the waste and untreated sewage. We are working hard to combat against this with the Secretariat of the South Pacific Regional Environment Program for 20 years. But still, we have a long way to go. The implementing waste management system is very important. We are doing this with 14 countries, 14 states in the Pacific. Also, the world must urgently deal with the life-threatening impacts on low-lying seas areas of sea level rise caused by climate change. It's a matter of death or life to some of those small island states. And also, not only that, you know, of course, we are working together to fight against the greenhouse gas emissions issue. But not only that, you have it may create ocean acidification deteriorating in those areas. That's also a very serious issue. JICA has been cooperating with Pacific countries fully, and we are trying to do more on this issue. Now, conclusion. In closing, let me again say that, you know, they are very much handicapped by the tyranny of distance and the sparse population. And then their responsibility is very big compared to their size of territory and the size of population. Therefore, the ocean, Pacific Ocean, has to be maintained as a peaceful place, not to be invaded by some superpower or anything else. But in order to maintain the peace over there, we have to make more cooperation and based on the international law. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kitaoka. Now I'm going to move on to Mr. Danny Fowry, former president of the Seychelles. Actually, Mr. Fowry, former president, he has been an incredible advocate for SIDS, even before the pandemic, speaking to the United Nations. And I, for one at least, am very, very interested to hear what you have to say. I hope it will be also not just the message of anxiety, but also of possibly of hope. Mr. Fowry.
Yes, so nice to be with you. We have three crises on our hands. We have the health crisis, which is caused by COVID. We have the economic crisis, which is also caused by COVID. And of course, we have the climate change crisis. So what do we do as small island developing states? We need to recognize that we have what we call here the next frontier of our development. And this is the blue economy. And we must, all of us, rapidly put in place the right framework and mobilize international support so that we can fast track the development in the blue economy. That's one. The second point here is that our overall reliance on fossil fuel, and what we need to do now is rapidly mobilize the international community and have a coordinated response. How do we come to the assistance for small island states? where renewable energy is concerned, be it wind energy, be it solar, and of course, offshore wind energy. So these are the two main areas that we need to be looking at. If we are able to do that, we will be able to relaunch our economy and create the necessary innovative structures that will inspire the young people of our country.
I'll move on now to Thomas Tune Andersen. He's the chairman of Ørsted. And for those of you who don't know, he's the chairman of a very substantial wind energy group, and which has a highly laudable and optimistic goal, and that is to aim for renewable energy 100%. Not technologically possible at the moment, but definitely something I suppose all of us could wish for. So, Mr. Andersen, would you like to tell us, how do you think that can be achieved? Can we really have renewable energy at 100%?
Yes, we can. And of course, that's also our belief. So maybe a few words of optimism and opportunity here. I think it's important when we look at the small island countries that, of course, there are unique circumstances there. But I think the important thing here is to also look at what have we already seen globally and what are some of the opportunities and the learnings we have had from these areas. So if I kind of take the slightly broader view and look at what I think are the opportunities, there's an issue of scale. So it will be very important somehow in the planning and as these countries, they work with each other to try and think across nation boundaries and not only on small nations. And there's an infrastructure challenge and so on in that, but it's all kind of known technology, maybe at a different scale, but it's all known. So I think the real issue here is acknowledging, as we do, that, for example, wind energy has an impact. Setting up wind farms does have an impact on the local environment, but it's also an opportunity to do other things. So my challenge or my suggestion is that really those who get together and do this spatial planning in a way together, that they set the ambitions and the bar high, because I think people who then get access to oceans, for example, as a wind farm, we need to make sure that we also enable some of the other things, whether that is creating reefs in the area, whether it is kind of cleaning up, whether it is leaving areas as just not being touched so that things can develop in their own way, or to manufacture seaweed and so on. I think we need to make sure that we go hand in hand with authorities to really raise the bar, and it becomes part of the decision base, and we avoid the silos which we have seen too much of, where it only becomes either a financial deal, or it becomes a business deal, or it becomes an NGO deal, because we all need to hold hands in order to do this. And we have seen very good examples already now of seaweed potential farming in these areas, talking to fishermen about how we optimize that, how we build reefs, how we create other kind of nurseries for fish, so on. So raise the bar, and we can do it together.
Moving on now to Shireen Nur-Salim. You know, Shireen Nur-Salim is vice chairman of the Gitti Group, and I hope she won't mind if I bring up a little story that she once told about how she went on her path as a conservationist, and that was you were influenced by your husband, weren't you? And in your early days of dating, he actually said to you, you know, you really ought to use only one tissue paper, and you thought to yourself that this is going to be tough. Is being green tough? Is that something that we all have to be conscious of? Not using many tissue papers, but on a much bigger scale for all sorts of other things?
Absolutely, yeah. I think, thank you very much for this opportunity. I think, you know, you shared the story of, you know, how I started on the journey. And I think my husband, he's on the board of Conservation International. And I think also along the way, I started to join some of the sessions and visits especially to visits a lot of the small islands, and we have seen sort of from maybe over 20 years ago some of the changes that has how the fishing stock has been depleted. Now I think it's like 90% either overfished or at the capacity, so that we are leading to a global decline. And I think we have also, I think it's really a warning sign. I think COVID, we have just passed 100 million cases and 2 million over deaths. And I think it's very much a reminder by nature, and that there is a challenge, and the climate challenge is the overarching common challenge. And I think the youth and the indigenous communities who are very much stewards, and also those who are in the small island development states, I think they are protesting and they're telling us something. And if we do not act, and I think to bridge this developing barrier, I think that it is we are leading to a path that each of us will regret down the road. And I would say 2018, I think, because I'm in my background is this bamboo building, is the first tallest, highest bamboo architecture. It's in Bali. Indonesia hosted the Trihita Karana Forum on blended finance and innovation for better business, better world. And this is jointly with WAF, with World Bank, IMF, OECD, many global partners. It was around the IMF World Bank annual meetings. And one of the things that was launched was the Trihita Karana Roadmap on blended finance. The idea of that is, how do we crowd in development funds as well as philanthropic funds to support meaningful causes, so that would crowd in the private sector as we solve these complex challenges. And I think that the renewable solutions such as wind energy, and I really appreciate, I think, the previous speakers. And I think Japan, actually Osaka, was where blended finance was included in the leaders' communique. So I think Canada, Indonesia, and I think we are looking forward next year, where we host the next G20, to host the next Trihita Karana Forum. And that could be a challenge, whether what Thomas said, to integrate the renewable floating offshore solutions, maybe with the how do we, because if it's floating solutions, you would have opportunities, like you say, to do the farming, whether it's seaweed or the corals, you could integrate those technology. I think WEF just announced the AI has shown that they can do farming better than the best strawberry farmers. So I really feel that there is an integrative solution. And actually Indonesia, I'm also special advisor to the Coordinating Minister of Maritime and Investments. So I think we are launching the Blue Halo S, which is also looking at a sustainable fishery solution. So if we could integrate that and create blended finance, I think that's an opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Nur Salim. I'm now going to move on to just the concluding remarks, not concluding, but some of the remarks from Kirsten Broughton, who's CEO of DNB, one of Scandinavia's very, very leading banks. And one of the things that I'm sure she's going to be addressing now is the question of the financing, because without that, then all of this might end up be just a lot of hot air. Can we actually have financing that's credible, that isn't just about profit maximization? And what does that mean about that rethink that banks have to take, that governments have to take, and we as ordinary people have to take about what we expect from financing? Kirsten Broughton, please.
Thank you so much, Lynn. And I certainly think that there is a lot of good news also to weigh in about the financing, because the trend that we see in financing is strongly supporting the opportunities that we talk about to address these challenges. And no doubt the pandemic has brought hardship to many, and we face threats both on our climate and the ocean. But I also thought I'd address my points through the glasses of opportunity for this panel. And before talking about finance, I'd like to say that despite being a further developed economy, there's actually quite some similarities between the small island economies and Norway. Indeed, we have built our economy on access to our natural resources, and this has been primarily access to cheap energy. We have also been exporting a lot of oil and gas, but we're in the midst of transitioning into an economy where this will be much less important. And in the center of that transition is indeed the ocean economies. In the past 10 years, we have quadrupled the importance of the ocean economy and seafood in our GDP. And we also see this taking a further important role in our exports. And the access through more stable and cheaper economy has already been addressed by Thomas and other members of the panel through wind energy, and in particular offshore wind energy. It's not a fully mature business as of yet, but there's been large leaps in both scaling funding into these projects and also new technology in the recent years that makes us approach this being a more viable business model and opportunities. It's impossible to do it without impact to the environment, but access to open seas is indeed extremely important. We have seen challenges here in Norway when we talk about land-based facilities or when we talk about nearshore facilities. So this is in fact an advantage that I think the small islands actually has in this context. So the timing is good. President Ford talked about the need to scale the blue economy, and we talk about tremendous need for funding into renewable offshore wind and other development opportunities for the ocean economy. And the access to finance is substantial. The private capital now that is looking for sustainable opportunities is vast. We are in the midst of developing frameworks to scale this further. And despite all the hardship the pandemic has brought, there is really been a leap in terms of the speed of the trend of capital moving in the right direction to help us and the islands solve the global problems of the world. So our oceans are threatened, but I'd argue they're also our future, and cooperating together we can solve this. And I think it's rather motivating to think that we are still just at the infancy when it comes to learning about how we can live with and benefit from our oceans in a sustainable way. And finance will continue to move in the right direction.
Thank you very much, Ms. Broughton. I'm now going to, there is a question from Andre Hoffman, I hope very much about mangrove restoration for carbon absorption. I hope you don't mind, but I'm actually going to reserve that for one of the breakout sessions later on, which actually refers specifically to that kind of financing. I'd really like to pull in, Mr. President, if you would just tell us, how do you think things have changed since you spoke to the United Nations? And do you think that you're more optimistic, that the world is more conscious of how much small islands need to be helped, not just for yourselves, but for all of us? If we don't help you, then we're not helping ourselves. Do you think we are more conscious now, Mr. President?
Well, I think the Secretary General of the United Nations, almost 2 months ago, he made a declaration and he said that it's important for the world to understand that we have another crisis, and he has declared this year as a climate change emergency crisis, so that we treat the COVID pandemic as the way we're doing it, but we can also reach out to other countries. And I believe that with the changes in the US, having President Biden joining the Paris climate change agreement is a good news for small island states.
if we look at what's happening in Southeast Asia, and if we look at what's happening in the small island states, how do you think that we can actually get many of these ideas to work? If I talked to you, Mr. Andersen, about this with wind energy, because part of what we're talking about here is about the restructuring of the economy, is to also have renewable energy that works and that doesn't damage the environment. But wind energy isn't as straightforward as many of us think. It's not just putting up wind farms and everything's fine. There are many demands, you must agree, Mr. Andersen. Is it realistic, really, for small island developing states, for seeds to have that much wind turbines out in the ocean?
As a starting point, yes. We have to remember that and no particular fun in this here, but there needs to be wind in order to make wind farms viable. And in some of these geographies, there isn't that much wind, and that is a fact. So we need to kind of home in on where that happens. I think with the cost coming down, of course, there is a scaling issue. But if we take the opportunity to combine both the offshore wind and the building of such, and also in a selective way, look at how can the infrastructure for the building or the installation and so on, how can that become local business in a way? We are kind of killing two birds with one stone, because we create the green energy out there, but we are also creating local jobs. So that's one positive side of it. And I think where there's a real opportunity here is in these micro opportunities, if you can call it like that, to create some success stories where we can go out, because the finance, as it was said, was there, the technology is there. So it is actually the combination that we now need to prove works, and the combination, whether that is growing seaweed or whether it is creating nurseries for special kinds of fish or whatever. And that is where I think it is important to make the next step, i.e. make some real tangible examples of how that works.
Ms. Broughton, Ms. Andersen has just said that the financing is there. Do you agree that the financing really is there? Is that what you're seeing also outside of Scandinavia? Because we know the Scandinavians are very keen on financing wind farms, but on the other hand, in the rest of the world?
We certainly see that the financing is moving in that direction, and to strengthen and build up under Mr. Andersen's point, working together through the value chain in order to solve these challenges we believe are extremely important. And we actually have a project that we're working on together where we're researching and working on ammonia as a fuel for shipping that would also take care of the challenges related to the carbon emissions from shipping. But we see that we cannot go at it alone. We need to work together. I think what needs to continue to move in the right direction for financing to be there, it is important to have measurements and standards. This needs not to be sort of a tick the box exercise in order to show that you do the right things. We need to improve the quality in order to understand that we're putting the money into the right areas. I believe for these type of projects, you would need a cooperation across public, private sector, but it is important to involve the private sector and to have that as a stamp on the entrepreneurial and future viability of the business model. But this is also how the wind energy sector has been developed slowly and carefully. And I think we are getting ready to scale, but it requires cooperation across the value chain.
Okay, and unfortunately, we've already reached the end of this open section of the program. And I must thank all the people who have joined in from all over the world to listen in. This actually is a first for WEF, where we're talking to everybody in these big programs where everybody can join in. But now we're going to move into the part for the invited participants. But please, I'd like to thank again all the people who've taken part now. That's wonderful. And those of you who are invited participants, just stay in there, hang on, and we'll move into the other sessions. Thank you very much.